You're in the wrong seat, honey. Economy is back there near the toilets." Those were the last words Corinna St. James should have ever said. She thought she was kicking a nobody out of first class, seat 1A. She thought her husband's platinum status and her family name made her untouchable at 30,000 feet. But she didn't check the manifest. She didn't know that the quiet woman in the oversized hoodie wasn't just a passenger. She was Serafina Vance. And Serafina didn't just buy the ticket. She built the entire airline. Watch what happens when entitlement meets ownership, and how the brutal hand of karma strikes at 500 miles per hour. The persistent hum of the grandiose engines of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was usually a sound that brought Serafina Vance peace. It was the sound of progress, of engineering perfection, and, quite literally, the sound of her life's work. But today, standing in the aisle of the first-class cabin of Vance Horizon Flight 909 from JFK to London Heathrow, peace was the furthest thing from her mind. Serafina adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel. She wasn't dressed like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She was dressed like a woman who had just come off a 70-hour work week, merging two logistics conglomerates. She wore a charcoal grey cashmere hoodie, black leggings, and comfortable running shoes. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, functional bun. She looked exhausted, not expensive. And that, apparently, was a crime punishable by public humiliation. "Excuse me," Serafina said softly, her voice raspy from days of negotiations. She looked down at the boarding pass on her phone, then back up at the seat. "I believe you're in my seat. 1A. The woman currently occupying 1A didn't look up. She was busy adjusting a diamond-encrusted brooch on the lapel of her cream-colored Chanel blazer. She was the picture of old-world wealth, or at least the desperate performance of it. Her blonde hair was lacquered into a helmet of perfection, and the smell of overly sweet floral perfume radiated off her like heat waves. "Excuse me," Serafina repeated, slightly louder this time. The woman, Corinna St. James, finally deigned to acknowledge Serafina's existence. She lowered her oversized sunglasses, peering over the rim with eyes that looked like cold blue marbles. She scanned Serafina from the scuffed tip of her sneakers to the loose threads on her hoodie. A sneer curled her lip. It was a look Serafina knew well. It was the look of someone who categorized the world into two columns, masters and servants. "We aren't ordering drinks yet," Corinna snapped, waving a hand dismissively. "And if you're cleaning the cabin, you missed a spot on the window." The cabin was filling up. A businessman in 2B paused while stowing his briefcase, watching the interaction. A young couple in row 3 stopped whispering to listen. Serafina took a deep breath, centering herself. "Don't engage, just correct." "I'm not the cleaning crew, and I'm not a flight attendant," Serafina said, her voice tightening just a fraction. "I'm a passenger. You are sitting in seat 1A. That is the seat assigned to me. Please move." Corinna laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that lacked any genuine humor. She turned to the man across the aisle. "Can you believe this? The audacity of the staff these days." She turned back to Serafina, her face hardening. "Listen to me, whatever your name is. I am Corinna St. James. My husband is Richard St. James of the St. James Hedge Fund Group. We are Platinum Elite Legacy members with this airline. I do not move for people like you." "People like me?" Serafina asked, her eyebrows raising. "People who look like they snuck in through the cargo hold," Corinna hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Now, run along back to row 40, where you belong before I have you fired. I know the owner of this airline personally." Serafina blinked. A tiny, dangerous smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You know the owner?" "Personally," Corinna lied without flinching. "We had dinner in the Hamptons last summer." "So, Unless you want to be blacklisted from the aviation industry entirely, get out of my face." Serafina looked at the seat. It was a Vance Horizon Cloud Suite, a prototype she had designed herself 3 years ago. She knew the stitch count on the leather. She knew the exact cost of the walnut veneer on the console, and she knew, for a fact, that she had never met Karenna St. James in the Hamptons or anywhere else. "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind Serafina. It was Liam, the lead flight attendant for the first-class cabin. Liam was young, professional, and currently looking very stressed. He held a tablet against his chest like a shield. "Yes, there is a problem," Karenna announced loudly, clapping her hands together. "This person is harassing me. She's claiming seat 1A is hers. It's clearly a mistake in your system. Remove her." Liam looked at Serafina. He didn't recognize her. Serafina rarely flew commercial, usually taking the corporate jet. And when she did, she usually kept a low profile. Today, she was traveling under her middle name, Rose, on the manifest to avoid fanfare. "Mom, may I see your boarding pass?" Liam asked Serafina politely, though his eyes darted nervously to Karenna. Serafina held up her phone. Liam scanned the QR code with his tablet. A green light flashed. Liam frowned, tapping his screen. "Ms. Rose, yes, you are assigned to 1A, full fare, first class." He turned to Karenna. "Mrs. St. James, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Your seat is 2A. It's just directly behind this one. Identical amenities." Karenna's face turned a shade of violent red that clashed with her blazer. She didn't stand up. Instead, she buckled her seatbelt. "I am not moving," she declared. "I prefer the bulkhead. I need the legroom. And I am certainly not sitting behind her." She pointed a manicured finger at Serafina. "Check it again." She probably photoshopped that ticket. "Look at her. Does she look like she can afford a $12,000 ticket to London? She's probably using a stolen credit card." The accusation hung in the air, thick and ugly. The cabin went silent. The businessman in 2B looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Serafina felt the heat rise in her chest. It wasn't shame, it was rage, but she was a CEO. She didn't throw tantrums, she executed strategies. "Liam," Serafina said, her voice ice-cold. "I would like to sit in my assigned seat. Now." Liam looked between the two women. One was a screaming, high-status frequent flyer who was threatening his job. The other was a quiet, casually dressed woman with a valid ticket. In the service industry, the squeaky wheel usually gets the grease. "Ms. Rose," Liam whispered, leaning in close to Serafina. "I am so sorry. But she's a legacy member. If we force her to move, she'll cause a delay. We might miss our slot. Would you be willing to take seat 2A? I'll issue you a voucher for the inconvenience. A bottle of Dom Perignon. Please. For the sake of the flight?" Serafina looked at Liam. He was terrified. She understood that fear. He was afraid of the complaint form Karenna was already mentally filling out. Serafina looked at Karenna, who was now smirking triumphantly, opening a magazine and ignoring them entirely. The path of least resistance, Serafina thought, or the path of greatest impact. If she forced the issue now, police would be called to escort Karenna off. The flight would be delayed by 2 hours. Hundreds of people in economy, people trying to get to weddings, funerals, business meetings, would suffer because of this one woman's ego. Serafina wouldn't do that to her customers. No. She would let the plane take off. She would let Karenna feel comfortable. She would let the trap snap shut when there was nowhere to run. "Fine," Serafina said, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "I will take seat 2A. I wouldn't want to cause a scene. Some of us have manners." Karenna didn't even look up. Smart choice, honey. Stick to the scraps. Serafina moved to seat 2A, placing her bag in the overhead bin. As she sat down, she pulled out her phone. She didn't open Instagram or TikTok. She opened the internal Vance Horizon corporate Slack channel. She typed a single message to her chief of operations, Marcus Sterling. Status of passenger St. James. Karenna on flight 909. Pull her full profile and get the chief pilot on the comms. I'm in seat 2A. Do not alert the crew yet. Serafina reclined her seat, watching the back of Karenna's head. Enjoy the champagne, Karenna, she thought. It's going to be the most expensive drink you've ever had. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off as the aircraft leveled out at 35,000 feet. The cabin crew immediately sprang into action, the clinking of crystal and china filling the quiet hum of the cabin. Serafina had her laptop open. She wasn't watching a movie. She was reviewing the quarterly earnings of the airline she was currently flying on. But her attention was split. She was carefully monitoring every interaction in the row ahead of her. Karenna St. James was a nightmare at altitude. This champagne is warm, Karenna announced loudly, shoving the flute back at a flight attendant named Sarah. I specifically requested the 2015 vintage. This tastes like vinegar. Take it away. I'm very sorry, Mrs. St. James. Sarah apologized, her hands trembling slightly. I'll check the chiller immediately. Don't just check it, fix it, Karenna snapped. God, the service on this airline has gone downhill. When I speak to the owner, I'm going to recommend a complete staff overhaul. You're all incompetent. Serafina typed a note on her phone. Flight attendant Sarah handled abuse with grace. Commendation recommended. Minutes later, the meal service began. I wanted the sea base, Karenna complained, staring at the menu. I'm afraid the sea bass was pre-order only, ma'am, Liam explained gently. We have a lovely filet mignon, or the truffle pasta. I don't eat red meat, and carbs are for poor people, Karenna spat. She turned around in her seat, peering over the divider to look at Serafina. Hey, you, hoodie girl. Serafina paused her typing and looked up slowly. Yes? Did you order the sea bass? I did, Serafina replied calmly. Pre-ordered it yesterday. Give it to me, Karenna demanded. It wasn't a question. I'm sure you'd prefer the pasta anyway. It's more filling. You look like you have a big appetite. The insult was juvenile, but the entitlement was staggering. No, Serafina said simply. Excuse me. Karenna's eyes widened. I said no. It's my meal. I ordered it. I'm eating it. Karenna turned back to Liam, her face purple with rage. Did you hear that? She's refusing to swap. As a platinum member, I have priority meal choice. Take her meal and give it to me. Liam looked like he wanted to open the emergency hatch and jump out. Mrs. St. James, I cannot take a meal from another passenger. That's against policy and, well, it's theft. I am not stealing. I am demanding appropriate service. Karenna slammed her hand on the armrest. Do you know how much money my husband brings to this airline? We practically keep this flying bus in the air. Serafina couldn't help it. She let out a short, dry laugh. Karenna whipped around again. Something funny? Just the math, Serafina said, closing her laptop. You mentioned your husband is Richard St. James, the hedge fund manager? That's right. Be impressed. I know the firm, Serafina said. Mid-sized, mostly domestic volatility trading. Your husband's firm spends approximately $150,000 a year on corporate travel. Vance Horizon's daily operating cost is around $4.2 million, so saying you keep this airline in the air is like saying a single raindrop caused a flood. It's statistically insignificant. The cabin went dead silent. The businessman in 2B choked on his water, trying to suppress a laugh. Karenna stared at Serafina, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She wasn't used to people talking back with data. She was used to people bowing down to her volume. "You insolent little—" Karenna sputtered. "How dare you speak to me about finance? You probably can't even balance a checkbook. Who are you? Some affirmative action hire at a bank?" "Something like that," Serafina said, her eyes gleaming with dangerous amusement. "Well, listen here," Karenna hissed, leaning over the seat. "When we land, I'm going to have the authorities waiting. I'm going to tell them you threatened me. I'm going to tell them you were aggressive. And who do you think they'll believe? The woman in the Chanel blazer, or the woman in the hoodie who looks like she's running from the law?" It was a direct threat. And it was a threat that used racial and class prejudice as a weapon. It was the exact kind of behavior that Serafina had built her company to fight against. Serafina's phone buzzed. It was a message from the cockpit. "Captain Miller here. We just got the message from HQ. Miss Vance, we are at your command. Do you want us to divert?" Serafina looked at the message. Diverting the plane would cost thousands and inconvenience everyone. No. She wanted Karenna to sweat. She wanted the audience to be full. She typed back, "Proceed to London, but ask ground control to have the Heathrow Port Authority and our legal counsel, Mr. Henderson, meet the gate. And Captain, I'd like to visit the cockpit. Now." Serafina unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Where do you think you're going?" Karenna sneered. "Toilets in the back." "I'm going to stretch my legs," Serafina said. She walked past Karenna, past the galley, and stopped at the heavy reinforced door of the cockpit. Liam was standing there, looking confused. "Ms. Rose, you can't be here. Federal regulations." Before he could finish, the cockpit door clicked and buzzed. It opened from the inside. Captain Miller, a grey-haired veteran pilot with 4 stripes on his shoulder, stepped out. He didn't look at Liam. He looked straight at Serafina. To the shock of the entire first-class cabin, Captain Miller stood at attention and saluted. "Miss Vance," the captain said, his voice booming with respect. "Welcome aboard. We didn't know you were flying with us today. It is an honor." Karenna St. James dropped her fork. It hit the china plate with a loud clatter. "Vance?" Karenna whispered. She looked at the safety card in the seat pocket. "Vance Horizon Airlines." Serafina didn't look back at Karenna. She smiled at the captain. "Good to see you, David. Smooth flight so far, though the turbulence in row 1 is a little severe." "We can handle that, Mum," the captain said, glancing sharply at Karenna. "Not yet," Serafina said, her voice carrying through the cabin. "Let her finish her meal. I want her to have full energy for what happens when we land." Serafina stepped into the cockpit, and the door closed behind her, leaving a stunned cabin and a very pale Karenna St. James in its wake. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was a blend of professional calm and palpable awe. Captain David Miller, along with his first officer, a sharp young woman named Anya Sharma, turned from their controls, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the instrument panel. "Ms. Vance, it's truly an unexpected pleasure," Captain Miller repeated, a genuine smile replacing his earlier solemnity. "If we'd known, we'd have rolled out the red carpet, or at least cleared the cabin." Serafina gave a tired but appreciative smile. "David, Anya, please carry on with your duties. I just needed a moment of peace, and perhaps to observe operations from the sharp end." She nodded towards the panoramic windows, where the Atlantic Ocean was a vast, inky canvas, dotted with the occasional pinprick of distant ship lights. "Of course, Ma'am," Anya replied, her voice steady despite the obvious excitement in her eyes. "Anything you need, just ask." Serafina settled into the jump seat behind the pilots, taking a moment to simply breathe in the familiar scent of aviation fuel and ionized air. For her, This was home. This was where she started. Not in a boardroom, but in a hangar, learning every bolt, every wire, every aerodynamic principle. "So, the issue in first class?" Captain Miller asked, his tone now laced with concern. "My ground crew reported some distress calls before we departed, and then Mr. Sterling's urgent message." "An entitled passenger," Serafina said, waving a dismissive hand. "Karenna St. James. Her husband is Richard St. James, of the St. James Hedge Fund. Platinum Elite Legacy, apparently." She chuckled. "She tried to claim my seat and then proceeded to insult me, my staff, and the entire concept of good manners. She's currently operating under the delusion that she funds our entire operation." Anya gasped softly. "I saw her, ma'am. She was quite animated during boarding. We had to hold our slot for an extra 5 minutes because she insisted her Louis Vuitton needed its own overhead compartment facing a specific direction." "Typical," Serafina murmured. "I've given instructions to Marcus Sterling. He's already in motion. We'll let her enjoy the flight. Let her believe she's won. But when we land, it's going to be a very different story." "You want her removed from the flight?" Captain Miller asked, his hand hovering near the comms panel. "I can have the air marshals, or even arrange a diversion to Dublin if it's an immediate threat." "No, David, not yet. She threatened me with the authorities upon arrival in London. She implied I would be arrested based on my appearance. She used veiled racial slurs and classist remarks throughout the interaction." Serafina's voice had lost its playful edge, replaced by a steely determination. "Let her have her grand arrival. I want her to walk off this plane, feeling triumphant. Then I want the world to watch as that triumph crumbles." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, decisive tone. "When we are on final approach, David, inform London, Heathrow Ground Control, that Vance Horizon Airlines Flight Eternal 9 requires a priority gate with direct access to the Port Authority and our legal team. Specify high security incident if you need to, but do not mention my name on the general comms. Just refer to corporate request from HQ." Captain Miller nodded, his face grim. He understood. This wasn't just about a seat, it was about the integrity of his airline, and by extension, his crew. "Understood, Miss Vance. We'll make it happen." Serafina then turned to Anya. "Anya, could you discreetly instruct the cabin crew, especially Liam and Sarah, to document every interaction with Mrs. St. James? Every complaint, every demand, every disrespectful comment. Date, time, specific quotes. And also note the reaction of other passengers in first class. We need a full incident report for our legal team, signed by all involved crew members, before they disembark in London." Anya's eyes gleamed with a quiet satisfaction. "Consider it done, Miss Vance. They've been waiting for this." Serafina spent the next hour reviewing some flight data with Anya, discussing a new fuel efficiency protocol she was implementing. She talked about the challenges of scaling operations while maintaining impeccable service. She was in her element, the weight of the first-class incident momentarily forgotten as she focused on the big picture. But as the plane began its gradual descent towards the sprawling lights of London, her thoughts returned to Karenna St. James. She thought she knew the owner, Serafina mused. She thought she could pull rank, use her wealth and privilege as a shield, but she picked the wrong target on the wrong flight. As the fasten seatbelt sign illuminated once more, Serafina stood up. "Thank you both," she said, shaking Captain Miller's hand and offering a warm smile to Anya. "Excellent flight. See you on the ground." "It's been an honor, Miss Vance," Captain Miller replied. Serafina exited the cockpit, the door hissing shut behind her. The first-class cabin was dimly lit, most passengers dozing or watching movies. Karenna St. James was asleep in 1A, a silk eye mask covering her face, her mouth slightly agape. She looked smug, even in slumber. Serafina returned to 2A, retrieving her laptop and phone. She sent a final message to Marcus Sterling, confirming Heathrow Port Authority and legal counsel at the gate for Flight 909. Prioritize the immediate offloading of passenger Karenna St. James for questioning. Do not allow her to clear customs. Hold her at the gate with Port Authority. Inform husband if necessary. She then added a note. Bring a camera crew from Vance Horizon PR. Discreetly. I want this documented. A small anticipatory shiver ran down her spine. The wheels were in motion. The announcement came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are now commencing our final descent into London Heathrow Airport. We anticipate a smooth landing in approximately 20 minutes. The local time in London is 7:30 a.m. Karenna St. James stirred awake, stretching languidly in her plush first-class seat. She removed her eye mask, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She glanced back at Serafina in 2A, a smug smirk twisting her lips. Serafina was silently packing away her laptop, a picture of calm efficiency. That's right, hoodie girl, Karenna thought to herself. You know your place now. You know who's in charge. The flight attendants, including Liam and Sarah, moved through the cabin, collecting discarded blankets and ensuring seat backs were upright. Liam meticulously recorded Karenna's final, minor complaints about the temperature of her coffee and the quality of the onboard Wi-Fi. Sarah, still composed, managed a tight smile. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, then taxied smoothly towards the terminal. As it slowed, Karenna began gathering her designer handbag and scarf, humming a little tune of victory. She was already planning her triumphant recount of the flight to Richard, detailing how she put that uppity woman in her place. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at Gate 23, the captain announced. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the fasten seatbelt sign has been switched off. A few moments later, the seatbelt sign extinguished with a chime. Karenna immediately unbuckled, eager to be the first off. She stood up, reaching for her expensive carry-on. Excuse me, Mrs. St. James, Liam said, stepping towards her, a polite but firm expression on his face. Could you please remain seated for a moment? We have a special request from ground control. Karenna scoffed. A special request? I have a connecting flight. I don't have time for your incompetence. It's not incompetence, ma'am, Liam replied, glancing at Serafina. It's a matter of airport security. Just then, the aircraft door hissed open. But it wasn't the usual ground crew or gate agent who appeared. Two uniformed officers from the London Heathrow Port Authority, stern-faced and unsmiling, stepped into the cabin. They were followed by a man in a sharp suit, carrying a slim briefcase. Vance Horizon Legal Counsel, Mr. Geoffrey Henderson. Behind him, almost unnoticeable, was a woman from the Vance Horizon PR department, holding a small professional camera, its lens discreetly pointed. Karenna looked up, surprised. What is the meaning of this? Why are there police? The first Port Authority officer, a towering woman with sharp eyes, spoke. Mrs. Karenna St. James? Karenna, still under the illusion of her own importance, puffed out her chest. That's me. What can I do for you, officers? Is there a problem? Perhaps with that woman in 2A? She caused quite a ruckus. She pointed at Serafina. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his expression grave. Mrs. St. James, I am Geoffrey Henderson, legal counsel for Vance Horizon Airlines. These officers are here at our request. We have received multiple complaints regarding your conduct during this flight, including harassment, verbal abuse of our staff, attempted theft of a passenger's meal, and making threats against another passenger. Karena's face, which had been a picture of smugness moments before, slowly began to lose its color. Harassment? Threats? That's absurd. I'm a Platinum Elite Legacy member. I was merely exercising my right to proper service. The second Port Authority officer stepped forward. Mrs. St. James, we also have a report of you making racially charged remarks and classist statements towards a fellow passenger. These are serious allegations. Karena's eyes darted wildly, finally landing on Serafina, who was now standing by her seat, watching the unfolding scene with quiet intensity. Serafina offered a small, knowing smile. "This is ridiculous," Karena shrieked, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. "This is all because of her. She probably lied. She's probably trying to get a free flight or something." "Mrs. St. James," Mr. Henderson said, cutting her off. "The passenger you are referring to is Ms. Serafina Vance, the Chief Executive Officer and Principal Owner of Vance Horizon Airlines." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karena's face went from pale to ghastly white. Her jaw dropped. Her carefully coiffed hair seemed to deflate. Her eyes, wide with sudden, dawning horror, darted from Mr. Henderson to Serafina, and then back again. "Vance," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at Serafina, truly seeing her for the first time. The intelligent eyes, the quiet authority, the subtle confidence that no amount of designer clothing could buy. Serafina took a step forward. Her voice was calm, clear, and utterly devastating. "You said you knew the owner, Karena," Serafina said, her words echoing through the now silent first-class cabin. "You said you had dinner with her in the Hamptons. You said you kept this airline in the air. You threatened my crew. You threatened me. You called me Hoodie Girl and suggested I belonged in economy, or worse, in jail." Serafina paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Karena looked like she might pass out. "Well," Serafina continued, a glint in her eyes, "I am the owner. I built this airline, bolt by bolt, route by route, service by service. And the only thing you've kept in the air today is your own inflated sense of self-importance." The first-class cabin, including the businessman in 2B who had been silently enjoying the show, let out a collective, audible gasp. Liam and Sarah exchanged a look of triumphant vindication. "Officers," Mr. Henderson stated, gesturing to Karena, "we wish to press charges for harassment, defamation, and uttering threats. Furthermore, Vance Horizon Airlines is immediately revoking Mrs. St. James's Platinum Elite Legacy status, and she will be permanently banned from all future Vance Horizon flights and partner airlines." Karena's knees buckled. "Banned? You can't ban me. My husband—" "Your husband, Richard St. James, has already been contacted," Mr. Henderson said. "He is aware of the situation. I believe he is currently re-evaluating his firm's relationship with our cargo division, given recent revelations of ethical lapses." The Port Authority officers stepped forward. "Mrs. St. James, you are required to come with us to the airport police station for formal questioning regarding these complaints. Please collect your belongings." Karena, tears now streaming down her face, slowly and shakily collected her extravagant handbag. She looked at Serafina one last time, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. "You ruined my life," she wailed, her voice cracking. Serafina simply raised an eyebrow. "No, Karena. You did that all by yourself. I just gave you the platform to show everyone who you truly are." As the officers escorted a sobbing Karena St. James off the aircraft, the cabin remained in stunned silence. The PR camera discreetly captured every moment of her humiliating exit. The immediate aftermath on the plane was a mixture of stunned silence and quiet murmurs of approval. As Serafina Vance walked down the aisle, Liam and Sarah were practically beaming. "Miss Vance." "Thank you," Liam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She was truly awful. You defended us." "You both handled yourselves with incredible professionalism," Serafina replied, giving them a warm, genuine smile. "I'll be putting in a personal commendation for both of you. And Sarah, that Dom Perignon I was promised. Please have it delivered to my office upon our return. I think we've earned it." Sarah's eyes widened, and she managed a small laugh. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." As Serafina disembarked, she was greeted by Marcus Sterling, her chief of operations, and a small team. Marcus, a towering man with a calm demeanor, looked at her with a knowing grin. "Turbulence in first class, I hear." "You could say that, Marcus," Serafina said, a slight weariness in her voice that quickly gave way to steel. "Did you get everything?" Marcus nodded towards the PR camera person. "Every agonizing second of her departure. It's already being prepped for social media." "Good," Serafina said. "I want a press release ready to go within the hour. State the facts. 0 tolerance for abuse of staff or passengers. Reaffirm our commitment to diversity and respect. Mention the full extent of the charges. And make sure Richard St. James's firm is aware of the immediate termination of all contracts with Vance Horizon and its subsidiaries." "Done and done," Marcus confirmed, already typing on his tablet. Richard himself called, frantic. He offered to fly out immediately and apologize personally on behalf of his wife. I informed him it was too late. He sounded distressed about the cargo contracts. "Good," Serafina said, with grim satisfaction. "Distressed is a good start. Now let's get out of here. I have a board meeting in 3 hours." By midday, the story was breaking across every major news outlet. "Vance Horizon CEO Serafina Vance personally confronts abusive passenger on flight," screamed one headline. Another, "White woman snatched black CEO's seat, then turned pale when she said, 'I built this airline.'" The video of Corinna St. James's tearful, humiliating escort off the plane went viral, reaching millions of views within hours. The internet was ablaze. Opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of Serafina. People praised her calm strength, her refusal to back down, and her decisive action. There were countless memes of Serafina's calm expression juxtaposed with Corinna's horrified face. Hashtags like "Built this airline" and "Karma at 5,000 feet" trended globally. Corinna St. James became an instant pariah. Her social media accounts were deluged with angry comments. Her picture was plastered everywhere, a symbol of entitled, out-of-touch privilege. Meanwhile, Vance Horizon's stock saw a modest bump. But more importantly, employee morale soared. Serafina had not just protected her staff, she had shown them, unequivocally, that she had their backs. The airline received an outpouring of support from customers, many citing their renewed respect for the company's values. But the story wasn't just about public humiliation. The legal ramifications began almost immediately. Richard St. James's hedge fund, already under scrutiny for some questionable trading practices, came under intense pressure. Vance Horizon's cancellation of lucrative cargo contracts sent shockwaves through the market, raising questions about the firm's stability. Other major corporate clients, keen to distance themselves from the negative PR surrounding Corinna, began quietly reviewing their own contracts with St. James Hedge Fund. Serafina watched it all from her London office, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. She knew this wasn't just about one incident. It was about making a statement that power, true power, came from creation, from hard work, from integrity, not from inherited wealth or an inflated ego. She took a call from an old mentor, David Sterling, a seasoned airline executive who had once told her she was too ambitious for a woman, too direct for a person of color. "Serafina," David said, his voice gruff. "I saw the news. A masterclass. Absolute masterclass. I always told you you'd shake things up. Never thought you'd do it at 35,000 feet. "Just proving your old predictions wrong, David," Serafina replied with a dry laugh. "You've sent a clear message," David continued, "not just to Corinna St. James, but to every entitled customer out there, and every employee watching. Well done, Serafina. Well done. The hard karma." Serafina had envisioned for Corinna St. James began to unfold with ruthless efficiency. It wasn't just public humiliation and a ban from Vance Horizon. It was a domino effect that meticulously dismantled the very foundations of Corinna's privileged life. The port authorities' questioning of Corinna quickly escalated. Her belligerence and inconsistent story, coupled with the detailed incident reports from Liam and Sarah, and the video evidence provided by Vance Horizon, led to formal charges. Not just for harassment, but also for making false statements to law enforcement. Her initial arrogance transformed into panicked desperation, but it was too late. The financial fallout for Richard St. James was swift and brutal. Vance Horizon wasn't just a major client. Its very public severing of ties, citing ethical and reputational incompatibility, triggered a cascade. Other companies, sensing weakness and eager to avoid guilt by association with the now infamous Corinna St. James incident, began pulling their investments and contracts from St. James Hedge Fund. Richard's reputation, once built on an illusion of old money stability, crumbled under the weight of his wife's public disgrace. Investors, already wary of market volatility, became spooked by the media storm and the implied character issues within the firm's leadership. Within weeks, the hedge fund, which had been teetering on the edge of solvency, spiraled into a full-blown crisis. Serafina received daily updates from Marcus Sterling. "St. James Hedge Fund is down 30% this quarter, Serafina. Analysts are predicting total collapse by year-end. And Corinna's legal fees are reportedly astronomical. Her PR team is struggling to spin a narrative that isn't entitled rich lady gets her comeuppance." "Excellent," Serafina responded, without a hint of malice, only a cold satisfaction. "Justice, Marcus. It takes many forms." The St. James family's personal life also became a public spectacle. Their lavish Hamptons estate, once a symbol of their wealth, was now a target for paparazzi. Details of their personal finances, including a shocking amount of debt leveraged against their assets, began to leak to the press. It turned out Richard St. James's platinum elite legacy status was more of a carefully constructed facade than genuine generational wealth. They had been living beyond their means, striving to maintain an image they couldn't truly afford. Corinna, once a fixture on the society pages, was now a recluse. Her friends, the very people she had bragged to about her connections and her husband's money, abandoned her. No one wanted to be associated with her toxic brand of entitlement. Invitations to exclusive events ceased. Her credit cards, once limitless, began to be declined. The final blow came 3 months later. Richard St. James's hedge fund officially declared bankruptcy. The St. James's assets, including their Hamptons estate, their luxury cars, and even Corinna's designer wardrobe, were seized to pay off creditors. Serafina saw the headlines over her morning coffee. St. James Hedge Fund collapses. Owners face financial ruin. A small, grainy photo of Corinna St. James, looking haggard and defeated, accompanied the article. Her hair was no longer perfectly coiffed. Her eyes were shadowed with stress and fear. The Chanel blazer was replaced by a simple, ill-fitting coat. It was a stark image of a life utterly undone. Serafina reflected on the journey, She had built her empire from scratch, facing countless obstacles, dismissals, and prejudices. She had fought for every inch of her success, every dollar, every route. Karenna had merely inherited a name, borrowed a lifestyle, and then wielded it as a weapon against others. And in the end, that weapon had detonated in her own hands. Serafina finished her coffee, a subtle sense of triumph warming her. It wasn't about revenge, it was about the principle. That in her world, in her airline, everyone, from the CEO to the cabin cleaner, deserved respect. And those who failed to understand that lesson would learn it the hard way. The descent of the House of St. James did not happen in a quiet whimper. It happened with the violent, chaotic screech of a life derailing at high speed. While Serafina Vance was in London, cutting the ribbon on Vance Horizon's new European headquarters, a glass monolith that reflected the sky she now dominated, Karenna St. James was standing in the marble foyer of her Hamptons estate, watching the movers. These weren't the white-glove movers she was used to, the ones who handled her Ming vases with reverence. These were court-appointed repo men, thick-necked and efficient, stripping the house of its soul. "Careful with that!" Karenna shrieked, clutching a half-empty glass of Chardonnay, her hands trembling. "That armoire is 18th century French. It's worth more than your entire year's salary." One of the men didn't even look up. He just slapped a neon orange sticker reading "Seized Asset Darava 409" onto the polished wood. "It's worth whatever the auction house says it's worth, lady," he grunted. "Step aside." Karenna spun around, looking for Richard. She found him in the library, or what was left of it. He was frantically shoving documents into a shredder that was already overheating. He looked 10 years older than he had the day of the flight. His skin was grey, his eyes bloodshot. "Richard, do something!" Karenna pleaded, her voice cracking. "They're taking the piano. They're taking the artwork. You said the lawyers would fix this." Richard stopped shredding. The silence that followed was heavier than the furniture being hauled out the door. He turned slowly to look at his wife. The look in his eyes wasn't love, or even pity. It was pure, unadulterated loathing. "The lawyers?" Richard let out a hollow, terrifying laugh. "The lawyers are the ones who advised me to liquidate Karenna. They're the ones who told me that the St. James brand is so toxic, so radioactive, that our liquidity has evaporated overnight." He walked around the desk, stepping over a pile of subpoena papers. Vance Horizon pulled the cargo contract. That was 40% of our quarterly revenue, but it didn't stop there. Because of your viral video, the Board of Ethics at the Merchants Guild launched an inquiry. They found the leverage scheme. They found the debt. He stopped inches from her face. She could smell the stale scotch on his breath. "You didn't just lose a seat, Karenna. You popped the bubble. We were floating on perception. And you stood up in first class and screamed at the one woman who had the power to pop it." "I didn't know," she sobbed, reaching for his arm. "I thought she was nobody. Richard, we can rebuild. We have friends. The Vanderbilts? The Astors?" Richard yanked his arm away. "I called them. All of them. No one is taking my calls. You're a pariah, Karenna. You're the face of everything wrong with this country right now. And I?" He straightened his tie, though it was crooked. "I am cutting off the infected limb to save the body." Karenna froze. "What does that mean?" Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it onto the floor at her feet. "Divorce papers. My lawyers filed them this morning. Incompatibility, irreconcilable differences, and gross reputational damage." "You can't," she whispered. "I have nothing in my name. The prenup. The prenup gives you a payout based on the value of the estate," Richard sneered. "And right now, The estate is worth negative $12 million. You get nothing, Karenna. In fact, you're lucky I'm not suing you for damages. He picked up his briefcase. Get out. The house is seized effective noon tomorrow. I'm staying at the City Club tonight. You figure it out. Richard St. James walked out of the library, out of the house, and out of her life, leaving Karenna standing alone in an empty room, the sound of heavy boots echoing in the hallway as strangers boxed up her life. The transition from Mrs. St. James of the Hamptons to Karenna Smith, she had to drop the name to even get an interview, was brutal. The viral video had done its work. In the digital age, infamy doesn't fade. It festers. Every time she applied for a job, receptionist, personal shopper, even boutique sales, someone would recognize her. Wait, aren't you the get out of my seat lady? Aren't you the one who screamed at the black CEO? The doors didn't just close, they slammed. She was living in a cramped, mildew-scented motel room on the outskirts of Queens, burning through the cash she had managed to hide in a shoebox before the seizure. Her wardrobe, once insured for thousands, had been sold to consignment shops for pennies on the dollar just to pay for food. She sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at her phone. It was a cheap prepaid model. Her iPhone had been cut off months ago. She was scrolling through LinkedIn, looking for anything. A notification popped up, a news alert. Vance Horizon stock hits record high. CEO Serafina Vance announces Opportunity Wings, scholarship for underprivileged aviation students. Karenna stared at the photo. Serafina looked radiant, standing on the tarmac next to a gleaming new turbine engine, surrounded by smiling, diverse students. She looked powerful. She looked happy. Karenna threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. She put her face in her hands and wept, not out of remorse, but out of a bitter, burning envy that was slowly consuming her. She needed money. The motel manager had threatened to evict her by Friday. She pulled the local newspaper from the trash bin. She circled the only ad that didn't require a background check or a resume review. JKM Janitorial Services. Urgent hire, night shift, Kennedy Airport contract, minimum wage, uniform provided. The irony was a knife in her gut. The airport, the scene of her crime. But she had no choice. She dialed the number. 6 months had passed since Flight 909. The Vance Horizon private lounge at JFK International Airport was a sanctuary of silence and luxury. It was reserved for the ultra-elite, diplomats, A-list celebrities, and royalty. The floors were Italian marble, the walls lined with rare silk. It was 3 a.m. The lounge was closed to passengers. Karenna pushed the heavy cleaning cart through the double doors. She wore a shapeless grey jumpsuit that smelled of industrial bleach. Her hair, once her crowning glory, was pulled back into a tight, fraying net. Her hands were rough, the manicures of the past replaced by calluses and dry, cracked skin. She hated this shift, the first-class lounge shift. It was a torture chamber of memories. Every plush armchair reminded her of what she had lost. Every discarded champagne flute was a ghost of her former life. "Hurry up, Karenna!" Her supervisor, a gruff man named Miller, no relation to the captain, barked from the hallway. "The CEO is flying out at 5 a.m. for the Geneva summit. This place needs to sparkle. If I see one smudge on that glass, you're back to cleaning the economy toilets. Got it?" "I got it," Karenna muttered, dipping her mop into the grey, soapy water. She began to mop the floor, the rhythmic swish-swish, the only sound in the vast room. She worked her way toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the tarmac. She looked out. Parked right at the gate, bathed in the harsh glare of the floodlights, was the flagship aircraft of the Vance Horizon fleet. It was a Boeing 787-10, painted in the deep midnight blue and gold livery of the airline, and there, right on the nose of the plane, painted in elegant, looping script, was the name of the aircraft. Serafina had started a tradition of naming her planes after virtues. This one was named the Justice. Karenna stared at it, mesmerized by the cruelty of the universe. Suddenly, the double doors of the lounge swung open. Karenna froze, gripping her mop. It was too early for the flight. Security guards swept in first, checking the room. Then, a small entourage, Marcus Sterling, looking sharp in a tuxedo, carrying a briefcase. And then, her. Serafina Vance walked in. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wearing a tailored white power suit that seemed to glow in the dim light. She looked like a queen returning to her throne. Karenna panicked. She tried to shrink back into the shadows, pulling the cleaning cart in front of her like a shield. She turned her face away, praying to be invisible. Please, God, don't let her see me. Not like this. The plane is fueled and ready, Miss Vance, Marcus was saying. We have the flight plan to Geneva filed. Excellent, Serafina said. Her voice was just as calm and melodic as Karenna remembered. And the scholarship fund? Fully funded. The first 20 students start flight school next month. Serafina stopped. She was standing in the middle of the room, just a few feet from where Karenna was cowering behind the cart. Wait, Serafina said. She turned slowly. Karenna stopped breathing. Serafina walked over to the window, looking out at the Justice. Then she turned her gaze to the corner of the room, to the cleaning cart, to the woman in the grey jumpsuit, trembling with her head down. Serafina didn't say anything at first. She just watched. She saw the frayed hairnet, the cracked hands clutching the mop handle so tight the knuckles were white, the absolute, total defeat in the posture. Excuse me, Serafina said softly. Karenna flinched as if she'd been struck. She slowly, agonizingly, lifted her head. Their eyes met. For a second, Karenna wanted to scream. She wanted to rage, but nothing came out. The shame was a physical weight, crushing her lungs. Serafina's expression didn't change. There was no mockery. There was no cruel smile. There was only a profound, terrifying pity. It was the look one gives to a wounded animal that has brought its suffering upon itself. You missed a spot, Serafina said quietly, pointing to a small smudge on the marble floor near Karenna's boot. Karenna looked down. She looked back up at Serafina. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. I'm sorry, Karenna whispered, her voice a broken rasp. I'll get it. See that you do, Serafina said. She didn't offer forgiveness. She didn't offer a job. She didn't offer a handout. She offered only the reality of the moment. Serafina turned back to Marcus. Let's go, Marcus. We have a world to change. Right behind you, Miss Vance. The entourage swept out of the room, moving toward the private jet bridge. Serafina Vance walked into the future, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. Karenna St. James was left alone in the silence. She looked at the spot on the floor. She looked at the Justice outside the window. Slowly, painfully, she lowered the mop. She began to scrub. She scrubbed the floor of the woman she had tried to humiliate. She scrubbed away the dirt, just as she had been scrubbed from the world she used to own. The hard karma wasn't a lightning bolt. It was this. It was the quiet, endless scrubbing in the middle of the night, serving the queen she had tried to dethrone, while the world flew on without her. And that is the brutal, beautiful end of Karenna St. James. From sipping warm champagne and screaming at CEOs, to scrubbing the marble floors of the very airline she tried to destroy. It's a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. The higher you hold your nose, the harder it hits the ground when you fall. Serafina Vance proved that true class isn't about what you wear or who your husband is. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Serafina built a legacy. Karenna built a cage for herself. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who needs to see justice served, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a story. We drop new drama every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind. You never know who's holding the keys to your future.